like I'm piloting a Chinese fishing vessel, and I'm racing the North Korean fishing vessels.
UNICEF is proud to be leading the procurement and supply of future COVID-19 vaccines. Through the COVAX facility, it's a historic effort involving 170 countries to provide rapid and equitable access to initial vaccine doses when they're available. The scale is massive. We need to secure more than 2 billion doses by 2021. This effort will require every ounce of UNICEF's strength and expertise in procurement and delivery, and our long-standing partnerships with vaccine manufacturers. But we never shy away from these big challenges.
There's kids in grade 1 and 2 going, I'm going to be in like grade 7 by the time this shit's done.
Immunization Initiative.
And none of you are going to know what your friends look like.
Our partners, and thanks to dedicated frontline workers and volunteers worldwide, we deliver nearly 2.5
billion know what their face looks like from here up.
Every year, and we've been working around the clock to prepare for the COVID vaccine. We're stockpiling syringes, more than 500 million by the end of this year, and 1 billion by the end of next. And the safety boxes needed to dispose of
doses.
needles.
You have 500
We're
million
getting ready to ensure that these supplies arrive in countries
short.
by the time that the vaccines do. We've been investing in cold chain, storage, and transportation infrastructure
and the safety boxes to put them in. Can you burn that place? Like, why are we using needles?
With our friends at
Still
County,
to this day.
we invested nearly $500 million US in the last few years to strengthen cold
Break
chains.
that in Canadian dollars.
These investments will make it easier to deliver the COVID vaccine where it's needed. But our work is far from over. Our teams around the world are working with governments to prepare, while also keeping other vaccination campaigns up and running. And we're working closely with our generous donors to...
So mice really do squeak, like that stereotypical squeak. You little bastards are loud. So yeah, something closed all my tabs at once. Just both. That was interesting. Very interesting. And then, yeah, never mind. I don't want to talk about it.
We all get better is by witnessing your death. You can't stop. Perpetrating, living lies in your life. All the busted ass kids in the trap, clean the skill. Live by the gun and we'll make sure you die for the bill. It's on now, we committed murders on life. All you fakes perpetrating, living lies in your life. All the busted ass kids in the trap, clean the skill. Live by the guns, we'll make sure you die for the bill.
I run at you like a maniac with a pencil, fuck the trigger finger, because killing you simple. A psychopath going through a brain relapse. Somebody better hold him down, cause he's about to attack. They tell me to relax, to stop and take a breath. But the only way I'll get better is by witnessing your death. Low ride.
Shout out to my DJs.
I did.
welcome to Mignor Matter.
One of the DNA guy.
Revolutionaries. Become the last of the dying breed. Twin hammers look like the Siamese. I got that bean from the Japanese. My French girl waving a reminder, making mac and cheese. It is what it has to be. I'm killing out who's after me. They have to see me rich, and I swear it wasn't financially. Like who we frontin' for? They flying like there's a trampoline. These bitches couldn't marry a guy. It was a Magdalene. My strap like a little bro, a tag-along. It's these instrumentals we got with bragging on. It's roast with beer, bro, class ridges with dragon mine. The nigga with the gate and Sega was they were dragging on. The Megatron, Mammon and Lebanon. We were slapping that back and forth like a tether ball. Used to live on French Street, right in the Esplanade. Bitches wanna ship and make us film it like espionage. You know that's why they set for it. Like why you niggas ain't protect your neck for? Chopping in shit so we win. Like connect for the cylinder, always a spin. I connect for it right into your dome when I get it out the chest to drawer rapper. When you go on tour, it's all music. Maybe when we go on tour, it's all shootings. Like other shots got kicked, I gotta shoot it. Nigga, if you talk that talk, you gotta do it. Why they trying me? I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down bread. Why they trying me? I wear my heart on my iron sleeve. I'm the last of a down bread. Like he just wanna go on tour and make music. But every time you go on tours, it's all shootings.
This week, more about Halibut First Nation and the Blueberry Blunder. Where to from here?
Landmines. Snipers aiming from the trees. That's my opinion. They didn't ask my opinion, so I can say whatever I want. No, I could have swore I shuffled this.
Gunshot liquor, 50 drum beating like so 50. I'm Trinidad when my boy smoke a coca. Your homie got hit, he was riding like a chauffeur. Planet of the apes, I was blood clot coca. Pop pop, come with the straps, went off the shoulder. In the coffin, shutting the lid, it's giving you closure. You ever get close, something's coming out the holster. People ride the train, they're gonna see you on a poster. We poster, but you never talking when we approach. Get the blind, go online, and now you're doing the most. Kill him in my yard, nigga, like I could host. Didn't notice they pull guns when you thought you could roast. Just a dose. Know you love niggas need some milligrams. Sitting with a milli, he be posting it on Instagram. Dust says love me, selling quarters out the kilogram. Chrome polish so good, swear I used to pillow pack, baby. Fried chicken, not still gravy. Shaking up the crown like an earthquake in Haiti. Stop trying to rap, it's like how you niggas don't see me, you gallant. Nitro still trying to play me. They said I was a sick, but I'm sick though. I give you gangsta rap or calypso. We never stop eating like it's a pit bull. And young boy can't stop squeezing, he got his we with the hammers. Shorty in the kitchen, chicken like Louisiana. Killing like Diana. I go to sleep with a rifle in my pajamas. I was childish, but my Gambino no Atlanta. Gunshot for your head top. For grind, nigga, TG. Some of them niggas that we beefing is so lame. My guns some clips, my gun black and I spit like old days. Four white boys who let it sing like Coldplay. I sat back and got a flashback on my old ways like Blacka. 30 shots up in the fucking chopper. He got shot with shot back and couldn't see the doctor. Nigga bled, cause nigga I was fed up. Remembering the day my brother got it, couldn't get up. So I went and got a Mac 11 semi just to wet up. And two bad light skinned bitches for the letter. My city getting crazier, nigga. Moms losing their babies. I know the fiends have to carry my nigga to a place to get to bury my nigga. Fuck, well, since then, we got a couple heads to bury the trigger. Like what I keep a gun for. Cause in these streets, it's a blood sport. Not to mention links from the gun store. You shouldn't have brought him here. They're catching bodies here. As soon as niggas slap that metal on that wall of mirror. I need no one. I'm blasted by myself. And I'll keep beating metal to the plastic on them notes. Shoot shots to the pin break. Niggas been fake. And my target is that bitch.
I've never really felt like I've left a place because I don't think I've ever really felt it was home. Wow, it's going to be a weird Easter weekend. Really is going to be a weird Easter weekend. Still to come, we're going to take a look at some of the things that are happening in the atmosphere, in the air, and this has been a pet peeve of mine, and to forget the hand sanitizer perhaps, and take a look at what is happening and how the virus may be accumulating in the air, and perhaps there's way more data that we know about. That's why they're closing some of these areas, at least for this shutdown, lockdown. We'll take a break and we will return for Alex Pearson. I'm Arlene Ryan on Point Global News Radio.
Let's get back to business.
Hello, how may I help you?
Chorus is offering a free 30-minute virtual consultation to all businesses. Find out how you can market your business to our loyal listeners and enjoy incredible savings. This opportunity is limited, so book now. Chorus, let us help you reconnect to customers. And now is the perfect time with our Back to Business exclusive packages. Register at chorus.online/radio.
Because this junk fairy is like Charlotte, 1-800 disappear and bring springtime anytime.
Junk Fairy Charlotte reporting for duty. I'll send you out on the very next call, Charlotte.
Remember to stay invisible.
Uh-oh, Brian. When you give advice to a junk fairy, they have to give you advice in return.
Never hesitate to trade your cow for a handful of magic beans.
That is wonderful advice.
When you want junk to disappear,
all you have to do is
I
point.
think you made all the
call
junk
1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Or visit us at 1-800-GOT-JUNK.com.
Dash on Insurance Group.
How old was that? What did they say? 1873? I was really high this morning when I think it was 1873 or 1878 or some shit. It's about 145 years old. My 50-year-old sewer. The guys that built that, there's like 8 generations, or 12 generations of Masons ago. You wonder why they keep secrets. How do you find the guys to repair the work? Like, we want you to do, how do you find the guys that did the original work to have them redo it? We haven't done that in 5 generations, and we're really tired of getting calls about that type of stuff. Because, the name is on, like, engraved in stone.
A while, and they look forward to seeing.
It's I think 4 blocks long, that stretch, between the 2 roads, they said.
VA.
Northwood Mortgage.
So, how's your blood pressure? Pretty good? What if I said fixed or variable? 3 years
much,
or 5?
what's the water
10,
level at the bottom of that sinkhole?
Or maybe no down payment.
Where does all that water go?
Self-employed, bad credit, lots of consumer debt. So how's your pressure now? Yeah, pretty much what I thought. You want to make the most important financial decision of your life.
So back then there was fucking nothing there.
No matter what your
finances
finances are like. Northwood Mortgage,
416-969-8030.
Or visit us online at northwoodmortgage.com.
License 10349. Get all the day's top news and information.
Some old bastard said this is how we're doing
And your
it.
weather with meteorologist Anthony Cardell. Weeknights on Global News at 5:30 and 6. And download the Global TV app to get
everywhere in
news
this
for
city.
free anytime.
You're locally owned.
I can't locally owned what?
Is here to keep your car road ready. From tires and brakes to exhaust and engine repair, Meineke is your one-stop shop for total car care. For a limited time, get a basic oil change starting at $29.95 or a seasonal tire changeover starting at $49.95. Plus, you can buy now and pay later with our financing options. Book your appointment at Meineke.ca. Terms and conditions apply. Engine, brakes, tires, oil. Meineke, doing car care right.
Subway Restaurants introduces new potato bun sidekicks. Soft buns made with Canadian potatoes, stacked with quality ingredients. Try all 4 mouth-watering varieties.
So we would give you
Honey
the
mustard
mortgage,
ham,
but
savory turkey ranch,
Change Oil
Italian
8 says you owe them $42 plus. What year did they say that? So 1873 or 1878 or something? They squeak so to where they sound like they're dying, but they're not.
Find the pirate ship and go into the jungle. Half the man of King Panther, go into
Just
the
something you saw on TV, right?
We climb up the cliff.
Snow Parkway, where we actually have a right lane blocked with us. Also, mirrors image of our earlier issues. So now the westbound 401, watch out through the Janesville Parkway because of this. Earn PC Optimum points exclusively at SON mobile stations. Fill your tank, fuel your points at over 2,000 SON mobile stations. I'm Ari Yerbenovich, Global News Radio 640 Toronto Chopper Traffic.
Going beyond the hashtags and headlines. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment company. You're listening to Global News Radio. This is Global News at 9 o'clock.
This is Talk Radio 640. We beg to differ.
Good evening from the Global News Desk. I'm Darren Boland. In an effort to combat rising COVID-19 infection rates and spiking ICU admissions, Ontario is being placed under a province-wide shutdown. Premier Doug Ford says the change will take effect Saturday and continue for at least 4 weeks. He says with new virus variants becoming dominant in the province, the risk of inaction is too high.
Younger people are ending up in the hospital. And with these new variants, the risk of ICU admissions is 2 times higher. The risk of death is 1.5 times higher.
Well, the shutdown means
I see what our Chinese does.
Awareness Day. The U.S. State Department says it welcomes an EU-led virtual meeting later today on the Iran nuclear.
Oh, Jesus. It's not going to work.
About what's affecting our... Now look at the day's top stories. China and Malaysia have reached consensus on Belt and Road cooperation and bilateral ties. The agreement was made when Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held talks with his Malaysian counterpart Hishamuddin Hussein in Nanping, Fujian province on Thursday. Wang says China is willing to enhance cooperation on COVID-19 vaccine and drug research with Malaysia. He suggests the two sides align their development strategies and enhance cooperation in 5G, the digital economy, and modern agriculture. Hussein says Malaysia hopes to learn from China's experience in pandemic prevention and control and to boost bilateral cooperation in the fields of energy, investment, and food security under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. China says it supports holding a special meeting of ASEAN leaders to mediate Myanmar's situation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made the remarks on Thursday after a meeting with his Malaysian counterpart following their talks in Fujian. Wang Yi says it's hoped that groups in Myanmar will proceed from the long-term interests of the country and initiate dialogue and consultation as soon as possible. China and Malaysia agreed that the international community should uphold the basic norms of non-interference in internal affairs and create a good environment for the domestic political reconciliation in Myanmar. Beijing is calling on the United States to stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying made the remarks after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken sent a report to Congress threatening to cancel the special treatment given to Hong Kong. Hua says the achievements and prosperity in Hong Kong today were made through the hard work of citizens and support from the mainland instead of alms from foreign countries.
那么美方取消或者威胁取消
Whether the U.S. cancels
Lots of
or
smack,
threatens to
lots
cancel the
of
so-called
smack.
special treatment, I don't think it will stop Hong Kong's road of development and prosperity, nor can it stop Hong Kong from continuing to integrate into the motherland, contribute towards the country, and obtain a greater space for development.
The spokesperson also calls on the U.S. to create favorable conditions for bringing ties with China back on the track of sound and stable development. Hong Kong residents will be allowed to return from COVID-19-stricken Britain on designated flights later this month as the pandemic situation in the Chinese city is showing signs of abating. The flights will depart London on April 21st and 28th. Travelers will be required to present proof of a negative nucleic
shutdown measures.
And they will, if we all do our part, allow us to get through this wave, to get more people vaccinated, and get back to the careful reopening path that we were on.
He recognizes this decision will once again be very hard on businesses. Toronto is also working to get more people vaccinated by extending the age eligibility at mass immunization clinics.
The age eligibility at Toronto vaccine sites will be lowered to 60 years old starting Friday at 8 a.m.
In Ontario, people aged 55 and up can can start booking their shot at pharmacies beginning Saturday. The province announcing today it's expanding its pharmacy program to another 350 locations. Brianna Carnegie, Global News.
And Health Canada says almost three-quarters, that is, of Canadians over the age of 80 have now received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, as of 1 in 3 people between 70 and 79. A Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Howard New, says he's encouraged with how the vaccination program has rolled out across the country.
What we are seeing in terms of vaccine rollout is encouraging. Regular deliveries of COVID-19 vaccines to and within Canada and the growing number of vaccinations being administered are positive signs in the fight against COVID-19.
Well, overall, almost 1 in 6 Canadians have now been given at least one dose, with 5.1 million people vaccinated as of today, and about 690,000 of those have received both doses. Listen to us in HD, tune to 95.3 FM, and select Channel 2. In sports, the Toronto Blue Jays starting off their 2021 campaign in the win column, taking a 3-2 win over the Yankees in New York. Game 2 of the 3-game set goes Saturday. Toronto will play its first homestand of the season at TD Ballpark in Dunedin, Florida, April 8th against the Angels. The original forecast from the Global News Weather Center: clear conditions overnight with temperatures dropping to a low near minus 12 with the wind chill. I'm Darren Boland. This is Global News.
Make up for the 5. One of the Johnson. Back to Beijing.
Airline bookings to Beijing, Hangzhou, Xi'an, and Haikou have increased significantly, and the aviation industry is preparing for several busy weeks ahead after a difficult 2020. Families with young children tend to make short-distance travel plans, with sales of toys, safety car seats, and pet food showing strong growth in recent weeks. Hotels and homestays in several metropolitan areas were sold out weeks ahead of the long weekend. In the meantime, authorities are advising the public not to let their guard down. Davin is president of the China Tourism Academy.
We can see an apparent rebound in tourism. We urge people not to let their guard down. People should follow the protocols like taking temperature and presenting a health card. Let's all follow the rules and enjoy a beautiful spring holiday.
Tourists are being encouraged to make reservations beforehand and plan their trips accordingly. It's estimated that Chinese spending on tourism and cultural activities in the first quarter will top 1 trillion yuan, or $150 billion, which is 150% higher than last year. The Beijing Hour last week.
Top respiratory expert in China is calling for the public to get vaccinated as soon as possible, addressing his concerns over the country's still low inoculation rate. Guayan has more.
And they're all the same, closed-in spaces. And then I know in prestigious Nature magazine, there's been recently an article on why these indoor spaces are still these prime COVID hotspots. Is that what we're looking at here, Dr. Bridle? Is this what we're looking at, watching this virus and how it flourishes in closed areas?
Yes, absolutely. This virus is known to travel in what we call aerosols. So these are not the large droplets that we would normally associate with the spread of viruses. For example, when we sneeze or we cough, right? Those are large water droplets that forcibly come out of our lungs. In this case, this virus largely gets transmitted in
coming out of your lungs. You're sick like me. You just equated everybody to me. That's bullshit.
Through our natural breathing.
My lungs are full of water.
These aerosols are composed essentially of micro droplets, so very tiny droplets of water that can efficiently carry this virus. And so indeed, it's interesting because certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, people were very much shunned if they ever spoke poorly about masks and mask wearing, and many of those people, people lost their jobs, over that. It's crazy. But as an academic scientist, I'm certainly happy to share, the science behind it. It's honestly, the mask that we are wearing, it's really quite silly, honestly, and I'll explain why. So again, this virus primarily it is released from. So if somebody's infected and the virus is replicating in their airways, that virus is primarily going to be leaving their body through these aerosols. Now, these masks that we wear, so let's take the surgical masks, because they're probably among the better ones that people are wearing. They have 3 layers. They're designed for surgeons to wear during surgery. But these things have a particular use. So literally, when a surgeon is wearing these masks, if we think about that for a moment, that is to protect the patient who's being operated on because you don't want to contaminate the surgical wound. And so it's literally to stop the surgeon from being able to sneeze and cough and send these large, potentially contaminated.
So what are you saying? Are you saying even though that the aerosol is there, that is it all masks you're actually saying don't work, or are you saying these particular masks don't work?
Yeah, pretty much every mask that everybody's wearing, thinking that it's conferring some substantial level of protection. So your listeners, what they should do, just out of interest, this would be an interesting experiment for them. They should go online and do a Google search for a biological safety level 2 pathogen, and then PPE, which stands for personal protective equipment. And the pictures that you will see coming up is the equipment that the government tells us that we as scientists need to wear if we want to be properly protected from what's called the containment level 3 pathogen, and that's exactly what SARS coronavirus 2 is. So the equipment looks like much like a hazmat suit, right? And in that case, the mask that are being worn to properly protect somebody from a virus like this is a large headpiece that goes over the head. It will be fitted. So, for example, it won't make contact with where somebody would have a beard. It'll actually fit around the neck, so that you avoid the air spaces that would be caused by a beard. So it fits it nicely and seals around the skin, around the whole head, and it will have a tube at the back that pumps filtered air into this headpiece. Right? This is the kind of equipment that we have to wear.
Yeah, but we don't have that, and I have, seen lots of really reputable videos of how the masks stop some of these things hitting us, and people who wear masks and people who are in areas, then the virus doesn't seem to spread as much. But if I can just put that aside for a moment, because that's a whole, I haven't heard of it spread in that way. The focus here is it's in the air, and it seems to accumulate in the air, and where we are seeing the cases, and we've seen it in the data here, is they've stopped gyms. There were 68 cases in the gym in Quebec, and even more. We're finding these closed spaces. Have we spent enough time on ventilation and getting new air into areas?
No, that's exactly what should have been done. So you hit the nail on the head here. First of all, I should just point out, I'm certainly not an anti-masker per se. I'm just realistic in what they are and are not able to do. So it's interesting, right? You know that a lot of this isn't spreading efficiently in a lot of places, but that's largely because people who are wearing the mask, right? If we're out wearing masks, these are almost entirely healthy people. That's why, right? People who have signs and symptoms associated with COVID are to stay home, right? And these masks are quite good at that. So again,
But are we wasting time and not doing things about ventilation? Because this came up with schools, and I went to the dentist, and they've got all these HEPA filters, and I felt very confident because they're changing the air in the room so often. And I felt good about it.
Scientists, we've been arguing for a long time, many of us, that this is exactly what we should have done a long time ago, especially with the long-term care facilities, right? Because that's where the people are that are by far the highest risk of developing severe and potentially lethal COVID-19. And so what this virus does, because it can pass out in these micro droplets from the lungs, when it sees these masks that we're typically wearing, for the virus, the pore size in these masks would be the equivalent of us being attempted to be locked up in a barn, but leaving the barn door open, right? That doesn't lock us up very well, and that's what it's like for the virus. It sees these pore sizes, right? It's like the barn doors are open, and it can freely pass through the mask. And on these micro droplets, the virus can travel up to 30 meters. So you think about that as well, right? We're talking.
Yeah, and that's it. It travels. It travels much farther. What about all the information? I mean, this is science on the fly. We're learning, we're going through this in real time. And everywhere, every business wants to make you feel good about hand sanitizer. I mean, sometimes I think if I smell it one more time, I'm going to flip out. I wash my hands and I take care, but are we being agile enough in this?
No, again, with us being able to travel 30 meters, what that means is, now we can understand why this virus was able to spread so well on, remember the early days of the pandemic when there were all of these cruise ships, and it was able to spread readily through there, and our long-term care facilities, hospital wards. What's common here is when you understand this virus can travel 30 meters on these micro droplets, these aerosols, And you understand that the air ventilation is often shared between multiple rooms in these relatively small spaces you would see in a hospital ward, for example. That's why the virus can spread so rapidly. So absolutely, we should have gone to places like our long-term care facilities. We should have been investing money into properly protecting these individuals by doing things like adjusting the way the air is exchanged in these facilities. A relatively simple fix would have been to have installed HEPA filters, because HEPA filters, now you're talking about filters that are designed to filter out very small particles, including many viruses. That would provide proper protection in these locations.
If you tried to wrap that around
it
your
is,
nose
you
and
know,
mouth,
and we're seeing more and more of them. And I can imagine we'll even see more. In this Nature article, one of the journalists who was doing it, or I guess they're a virologist, and they go around and measure how much CO2 is in a room because they know how many people have been breathing it. It gives them some idea where the virus is and how much it's accumulated.
Absolutely, yeah, because that's a clearly indicates that's a gas that's exhausted from our lungs, right, after we've pulled out a lot of the oxygen to fuel our bodies. And so that's an indication of how much of the exhausted air from our bodies is accumulating in a location. And absolutely what these scientists found is that even in quite large buildings with very high ceilings, there could be quite a dramatic buildup over time of carbon dioxide. And when you understand that it's not just carbon dioxide coming out of the lungs, but if somebody has an active infection with SARS coronavirus 2, that virus is coming out with it. So if you see an accumulation of something like carbon dioxide, it's a pretty clear indicator that if there are people in that vicinity who are shedding carbon monoxide, that it's also likely accumulating in these locations. So when we go into these strict lockdowns, like we were about to, but we keep the big box stores open, for example, where you find lots of people in there, those would be prime areas. So again, people shouldn't be fooled into thinking that wearing these masks, saying 2 meters apart, is preventing them from being exposed to the virus.
We're sharing air. Don't share air, and it accumulates. Dr. Byron Bridle, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Thanks kindly.
It's not
have a great weekend.
Dr.
Byron Bridle is Associate Professor of Viral Immunology at the University of Guelph. We're going to take a break, and we will return. For Alex Pearson, I'm Arlene Bunn, and don't go away. On Point, Global News Radio.
More air you can get from outside.
Time now for a check on the roads with a look at chopper traffic. Here's Ari Rabinovich. The 401 is now trouble.
In-person classes stopped a year ago because of COVID-19. Since then, a few times a week, the nearly 200 students receive free meals.
We do this because we realize how much our families depend on school systems, not only to provide academics to our students, but then also, our students do need a breakfast and a lunch.
When the school sent the children home to study online, the move highlighted what the students have been missing.
When the pandemic hit and we closed March 13th of 2020, we had 5 working laptops for students, or 5 laptops, and 3 of them worked.
It was a scramble, but through emergency funds, every child was provided with an electronic device in order to study. It's one of the strategies undertaken by the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. The Tribal Council now meets over Zoom to keep safe. Tribal Chairman Harold Frazier says the council implemented measures to slow the virus, but its arrival was inevitable.
It's just a matter of time it's going to get here. There's no way that we can keep it out completely because a lot of our people have to leave the reservation.
Half of the reservation is in Zibac County, one of the poorest counties in the U.S. People travel outside the reservation for jobs, for supplies. And there was another problem. The reservation is surrounded by North and South Dakota. Critics say the governors, both allies of former President Donald Trump, initially did very little to stop the virus, refusing mandates on masks and lockdowns. Both states paid the price. At one point, North Dakota had the highest per capita infection rate in the world. The virus hit the reservation in November with devastating effect, as it did with other reservations. Native Americans were twice as likely to die of the coronavirus as white Americans. Across the vast reservation, the tribal authorities imposed strict lockdowns.
permits for travel, and sent food to homes to keep people in isolation. All of these measures helped to push the infection rate down. Now some want to end the checkpoints.
Here's the borders.
Others protest to make sure they stay up. The tribal authorities say it's crucial that things don't return to how they were before the virus, broken down infrastructure and poverty.
Win your jobs. If we could get jobs for everybody, I think that will start it, jobs.
The reservation has come through the pandemic battered, but it has survived.
That was Toby Muse reporting. Results of the first trial show that the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is safe for adolescents. Owen Fairclough reports.
12-year-old Caleb Chung making history as the first child to receive a vaccine or placebo that should help turn another corner in the COVID-19 pandemic.
It was definitely a very special opportunity to be able to do something like this, because usually I'm just at home doing online school and there's not much I can really do to fight back against the virus.
Thanks to Caleb and 2,260 child volunteers who took part in Pfizer's vaccine trial, the drug maker has announced 100% effectiveness in 12 to 15-year-olds. The company has developed its vaccine with Germany's BioNTech. The results were given a cautious welcome by the country's government.
I don't do anything but online school. Okay, we don't go nowhere.
55 DRLOU or visit pinpointhealth.ca.
Don't miss the Pinpoint Health Show with Dr. Lou every Saturday morning at 11. And for answers anytime, call 1-855-55-DR-LOU or pinpointhealth.ca.
Hi, Keith here from Speedy Glass to tell you that sometimes even the best drivers are no match for rough roads, and a crack in your windshield can happen fast. Luckily, a cracked windshield is no match for my...
How did you know?
Global warming and climate change are visible. Yet the
really, because it's minus 12 and there was 20 yesterday.
Pervasive and equally devastating for the future of humanity.
Plus 20, zero's freezing.
It is scientifically proven that the loss of biological diversity increases the risk of zoonotic diseases.
The wind gusts are about
the COVID-19 pandemic is a grim reminder of the relationship between people and nature.
To highway speeds.
And if the humblebee becomes extinct, agricultural production will be devastated. Once despoiled, our rivers and oceans will no longer yield their plentiful bounty. If our forests diminish further and carbon emissions are unabsorbed, masks may become a permanent feature of our existence. It is therefore tragic that none of the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets will be met by the 2020 timeline. In fact, data reveals a further regression in the fight to preserve biodiversity and ensure the sustainable use of nature. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are integrated and interlinked. If the biodiversity goals are not achieved, most of the other goals will also be difficult to realize by 2030. It is high time to discard the economic...
They fail to invest in primary eye care services. That originates from the government not having any legal framework in our legislation to meet with optometrists to work around compensation issues. So we've had 3 decades where there's been little to no investment in primary eye care services, and that was reinforced again when the budget was delivered last week.
All right, tell us, what's being lost here? Who pays when we go for an eye exam, and how do you want things changed?
So when we are providing primary eye care services through OHIP,
you still blow air on people's eyes and the weird drops in
that we do in our offices. And because there has been no investment over 3 decades, the government pays about 55% of the cost to deliver that examination. and the optometrist is paying the other 45%. So we've really reached a breaking point where that's no longer sustainable. And what we are looking for is we need the government to commit to a formal negotiation process with us.
A random act of violence.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki called on the U.S. Congress to overhaul the country's gun laws, including requiring stricter background checks.
Yeah.
Water halfway between the north and south ends of the canal. Authorities expect that all 422 ships delayed by the blockage will have crossed the Suez Canal by Saturday.
422.
U.S. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has called for stricter gun laws in the wake of a shooting in Orange, California that left 4 people dead. The shooting near Los Angeles is the 3rd mass shooting in the U.S. in the past month. Ira Spitzer has more from California.
Authorities in the city of Orange say that 44-year-old Amenadab Gonzalez shot and killed 3 adults and 1 child at a business complex. Orange Police Lieutenant Jennifer Ahmad says he likely knew the adult victims, although the exact motive remains unclear.
It appears all of the adults were connected either by business or a personal relationship, and this was not a random act of violence.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki called on the U.S. Congress to overhaul the country's gun laws, including requiring stricter background checks.
And underscores the need for legislation to expand background checks, something that's worked its way through the House that the president certainly supports.
Gun control has long been a contentious issue in the U.S., despite having one of the world's highest rates of gun violence, with the right to bear arms enshrined in the country's constitution. The Orange County District Attorney says the suspect in these shootings could face the death penalty. For the Beijing Hour, I'm Ira Spitzer in California.
Johnson & Johnson has discarded 15 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine after an ingredient mix-up at one of its manufacturing plants in Baltimore. Reports say workers made the mistake several weeks ago, an error which forced regulators to delay approving the plant's production line. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the drug maker is working on rectifying the situation.
It's important for people to remember that this plant has not been FDA approved. It's still going through a rigorous review, and J&J is, of course, working through that process to bring the facility online and gain authorization.
Johnson & Johnson said a batch of vaccine made in a Baltimore factory run by Emergent Biosolutions cannot be used because it did not meet quality standards. Emergent is a manufacturing partner to both Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. Johnson & Johnson said in a statement that it's aiming to deliver 100 million doses by the end of May. A new survey in the United Kingdom shows that more than 1 million people have reported developing long COVID symptoms. The Office for National Statistics says 1.1 million people had COVID in the 4 weeks from early February to March the 6th. UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock has said that he's very worried about the impacts of long COVID.
We're putting more research money into tackling and understanding long COVID because it appears to be several different syndromes. This is a very strange, very dangerous virus, and it's yet another reason for everybody to be cautious. Enjoy the sunshine by all means, but nobody is safe from this virus until we can make everybody safe.
Of the affected people, the survey found that about 1 in 5 have symptoms of long COVID 5 weeks after the initial infection, and 1 in 7 after 12 weeks. The survey asked people if they had symptoms such as fatigue, muscle pain, and difficulty concentrating over a 4-week period. So far, more than 4.3 million people have tested positive for COVID-19 in the UK, and over 126,000 deaths from the illness have been recorded. Canada's most populous province has announced a 4-week shutdown as it battles with COVID-19 infections. Ontario's COVID-19 science table released new modeling data showing that without the shutdown, the province will be unable to curb the spread of new variants. The data suggests daily infections could rise to 6,000 by the end of this month if further public health measures aren't implemented. During the shutdown, in-person dining will be shuttered, gyms will be closed, and essential retail stores will operate at 50% capacity. The provincial government has asked the province's population of 14 million to limit their trips outside their homes unless it's an essential trip. The province's 7-day average for the number of COVID-19 cases recorded
is more than 2,300, up from nearly 1,800 a week ago. So far, more than 317,000 people in Ontario have received both doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. We're at 28 past the hour. Checking the forecast before the break, and Beijing will be overcast today. 18 degrees Celsius, the low's 11. Chongqing's overcast in 20, then it's down to 15. Lhasa is overcast in 15, below +5. Hong Kong's cloudy and 28 degrees, below 22. In North America, Washington, D.C. will be partly cloudy Friday and 8 degrees Celsius. New York City is partly cloudy and 6. In Africa, Nairobi's getting some clouds and 26 degrees. And finally to Oceania, Port Vila's getting thunderstorms on the day and 28 degrees Celsius.
What's the fishing like on the Philippines?
It's time for a short break. So far this hour, China and Malaysia have reached consensus on Belt and Road cooperation and bilateral ties. Today marks the 14th World Autism Awareness Day. The U.S. State Department says it welcomes the EU-led virtual meeting later on today on the Iran nuclear deal. Shane Bigham with you. Stay with us here on the Beijing Hour.
Right, Iran. I forgot about Iran. Yes. What was the deal? China and Iran were working on?
The People's Bank of China has worked with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority on technical testing of the digital currency for cross-border payments on the Chinese mainland in Hong Kong. The Chinese Central Bank is also cooperating with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, as well as the central banks of Thailand and the United Arab Emirates. Multilateral research project. Several Chinese cities, including Beijing, Shenzhen, and Suzhou, have piloted this digital currency since last year.
/snowmobile.
China's expanded the target population for COVID-19 vaccination to include people aged 60 years old and above. The document recommends that those people get inoculated as they are at high risk of severe symptoms or even death after being infected with the virus. People aged between 18 and 59 are covered under the current vaccination program. Azerbaijan has received the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines that it purchased from China. The vaccines produced by Sinovac have been introduced by authorities in the West Asian country for mass inoculation against the pandemic. Chinese Ambassador Guomin has been expressing hope that the vaccines will help Azerbaijan beat the virus and restore economic and social development. The diplomat also says China will donate another batch of COVID-19 vaccines to Azerbaijan soon. Azerbaijani officials have thanked China for the help with the fight against COVID-19, saying their country is willing to strengthen anti-pandemic cooperation with China. Cambodia has started to inoculate its citizens with COVID-19 vaccines developed by Chinese company Sinovac. Officials say they aim to inoculate over 74,000 people with the jabs during the current vaccination drive. Priority groups for the vaccination include frontline doctors and medical workers, government officials, teachers, the armed forces, and journalists. Sinovac vaccine is the third one for use in Cambodia in its COVID-19 inoculation drive, following the Sinopharm and AstraZeneca vaccines. The Southeast Asian country is targeting to inoculate at least 10 million people out of its 16 million population. More than 400,000 in Cambodia have been vaccinated against the virus as of Wednesday. The U.S. State Department says it welcomes the EU-led virtual meeting of the Joint Commission of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that's scheduled for later on today. State Department spokesman Ned Price says the U.S. is ready to pursue a return to compliance with its JCPOA commitments, consistent with Iran doing the same thing. He says Washington has spoken with partners about the best way to achieve this objective, including through a series of initial mutual steps. The European Union said in a statement earlier in the day that representatives of China, France, Germany, Russia, Britain, and Iran will meet virtually on April 2nd to discuss the prospects of a possible return of the United States to the JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. The United States and Iran are in a standoff over reviving that deal. The Joe Biden administration said that if Iran returns to full compliance with the JCPOA, the United States would do the same. But Iran has insisted its compliance would only take place once U.S. sanctions have been removed. Johnson & Johnson has discarded 15 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine after an ingredient mix-up at one of its manufacturing plants in Baltimore. Reports say workers made the mistake several weeks ago, an error which forced regulators to delay approval of the plant's production line. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the drug maker is working on rectifying the situation.
It's important for people to remember that this plant has not been FDA approved. It's still going through a rigorous review, and J&J is, of course, working through that process to bring the facility online and gain authorization.
Johnson & Johnson said a batch of vaccine made in the Baltimore factory run by Emergent Biosolutions, cannot be used because it did not meet quality standards. Emergent is a manufacturing partner of both Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. J&J said in a statement that it's aiming to deliver 100 million doses by the end of May. This is Shane Bigham, live from the Chinese capital. Coming up in business, 2 Chinese state-owned chemical companies are merging.
What? You're listening to the Beijing Hour. 60 minutes of comprehensive news. Your window on
China. We dropped that. Like he was running away from the microphone.
It's 36 minutes past the hour now. Turning to business and beginning with the markets, U.S. stocks finished higher on Thursday as investors digested President Joe Biden's infrastructure package. The Dow Jones rose over 0.5%. The S&P 500 gained nearly 1.2%, finishing above the 4,000 threshold for the very first time. The Nasdaq was up more than 1.7%. Biden unveiled a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, touting it as a once-in-a-generation investment in America and proposing a corporate tax hike to offset the cost. But Republicans have been rejecting any increase in taxes, while concerns over mounting debt and inflationary risk are expected to further complicate the plan's prospects. European stocks also closed higher on Thursday. London's FTSE 100 rose over 0.3%. Germany's DAX gained nearly 0.7%, and France's CAC 40 edged up nearly 0.6%. Chinese capital markets closed higher Thursday with the benchmark Shanghai Composite Index gaining 0.7%, the Shenzhen Component Index surging over 1.4%. Market analyst Timothy Pope has more.
We had healthcare stocks pushing the China export up by around 2%. All that was despite some relatively downbeat manufacturing data. It was a contrast to yesterday's Caixin manufacturing survey out today, recorded activity falling to a 10-month low at smaller and mid-sized manufacturers. But investors really seem to shrug that off, and they bought back into consumer and health stocks. Liquor, appliances, new energy vehicles were all back fairly strongly, while energy and financials pulled back a little bit from recent gains. Notable gainers today were Huadong Medicine, Great Wall Motor, BYD, and Media Group. All of them are investor favorites and fund manager favorites as well. But all that being said, we are still seeing pretty low turnover in Shanghai and Shenzhen. It was down near a 5-month low yesterday, indicating that there are still quite a few investors sitting on the sidelines right now.
I plug a cord into the side of your hybrid car, can I steal
Hong Kong
the
stocks also closed higher on the day. The Hang Seng Index increased nearly 1.5%. Elsewhere, Singapore stocks edged north, with the Straits Times Index going up around 0.3%. In Japan, the Nikkei was up over 0.7%. China's approved the merger of 2 state-owned chemical giants, Sinochem and ChemChina, will form a new conglomerate with interests in life sciences, material sciences, and basic chemicals, among other things. Sinochem was founded in 1950. It's a leading player in the oil and chemicals industries, notably providing agricultural inputs and services. ChemChina is the country's biggest chemical manufacturer. It maintains research, development, and production facilities in 150 countries and regions around the world. Huawei is reporting growth in revenues and profits for last year. The Chinese tech giant says its revenue went up 3.8% and profits went up 3.2%.
Fuck Huawei. They make phones that don't die. I need to hear that again.
Manager favorites as well. But all
that's world today.
Results for the last year are in line with expectations, reflecting stable operations and a healthy cash flow. U.S. President Joe Biden's unveiled a $2.3 trillion plan that aims to tackle some of the country's most pressing problems, including its crumbling infrastructure. The plan aims to revitalize transportation, water systems, and manufacturing, among other goals. The infrastructure plan is the second massive spending initiative of the Biden administration in 10 weeks after the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 rescue bill that passed last month. With more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang earlier spoke with financial analyst Einar Tangen.
So, Anna, first of all, President Biden has unveiled this infrastructure and economic recovery package totaling more than $2 trillion. But what are the main takeaways from it? And Biden said it's a once-in-a-generation investment in America. How do you view it?
Well, it certainly is once in a generation, because most generations couldn't afford to be spending this kind of money. On a political side, it's going to be very difficult to pass. There are
already different groups out there. The GOP has signaled they're not really interested, although individual Republicans have said that they'd be willing to work with it. In the middle, there's real, the middle of the road Democrats are arguing about how to pay for it and things like this. And then on the left, they really believe this package is too meek and too mild and that it needs to be bigger. Now, remember, Democrats hold a slim majority, but in order to get a package like this through, they would have to get 60 votes or do away with the filibuster rule. Now, doing away with the filibuster rule is, once again, politically fraught. There are Democrats who say they will not go along with that, so there are not enough votes to do that. So it's going to be very hard, and there's going to be a lot of negotiation.
And the President Biden's infrastructure proposal also includes $50 billion for the American semiconductor industry. So how do you explain that? What's the purpose behind it?
Well, obviously, he's learning from China. After years of criticizing China and saying that it funds and therefore has an interest in, all these corporations. Now, remember, this is one of the prime accusations that was leveled against CTE, Hyundai, and all the rest of the companies were delisted, that they're somehow connected to government, that it's unfair for governments to subsidize private companies in their research efforts. Now, what are they doing? They're promising to do exactly the same thing. The worry from the government side is that the U.S. has fallen behind, that there has not been enough research, not only in basic science, but in the applied sciences themselves. And they think that that will change things.
And the Democratic President cast his plan as a fundamental shift in economic thought away from the small government tax-cutting approach embraced decades ago under a Republican president. But will this really save the U.S. economy?
Well, it will certainly be a jump start to the U.S. economy. I mean, when you start spending numbers like that, 20,000 miles of road, 500,000 charging stations, these are all things which will put people to work, and there will be an economic multiplier. So it's a good kickstart to the economy. But in the end, it has to be something where the U.S. is offering something of value not only to people inside the U.S., but also to the world, if in fact they are going to be competitive. The question remains, can the U.S. try to do all of these things and still remain competitive with the rest of the world? A new idea is one thing, but as I said before, when you're making it, you have to make it in the lowest cost place possible, or your competition will.
And that was financial analyst Einar Tangen speaking about the Biden administration's $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan.
Depends what you make.
43 past the hour. Lenovo says it's working to cultivate a wider talent base to power Chinese industry. The tech giant says the country needs a greater pool of tech-savvy talent to ensure an upgrade of the manufacturing sector. It's launched what it calls a purple collar talent initiative to help foster manpower suitable for the fourth industrial revolution. Lenovo says purple collar talent refers to those who meet the requirements of intelligent manufacturing and understanding of the scientific theories that inform technology-driven industrial innovation. China's top three airlines suffered combined losses of over 37 billion yuan last year as COVID-19 took a toll. Air China registered the biggest losses, shedding more than 14 billion yuan. China Southern Airlines logged a slump of more than 500% in profits, the highest among the three airlines. China Eastern Airlines suffered the biggest drop in revenues, which plummeted over 51% from a year ago.
China Airlines,
ByteDance is refusing to comment on a possible listing of its short video app Douyin. Media reports say that the Beijing-based company is in talks about a possible offshore listing of the app in New York or Hong Kong. The reports say that the tech giant, which also owns Douyin's internationally facing stablemate TikTok, earlier considered a standalone IPO for Douyin in Hong Kong. ByteDance hired former Xiaomi executive Shou Chu for a newly created chief financial officer role last week, and it's seen as a sign that an IPO could be in the offing. The company's valuation in private trade has risen rapidly along with the market's expectations for an IPO. ByteDance granted employees shares that valued the company at $100 billion a year ago, and that figure has jumped to $300 billion as of last week. H&M says it's working to regain the trust of shoppers and partners in China. The Swedish brand says that it believes it can continue serving its customers in China while conducting itself in a respectful way by consulting stakeholders and partners. Fast fashion companies are at the center of a boycott in China, along with a number of fellow international brands, including Nike and Adidas, over their refusals to use Xinjiang cotton, citing forced labor allegations. We're at 46 minutes past the hour, and coming up in sports, China's first inductee into the FIBA Hall of Fame. Turning to sports now, here's Yang Guang.
Thank you, Shane. Women's basketball legend Chen Haishan became the first Chinese player to be inducted into the FIBA Hall of Fame as the World Basketball Governing Body announced the class of 2021 on Thursday. Standing over 2 meters tall, Chen claimed an Olympic silver medal in 1992 and was a World Championship runner-up in 1994 with the Chinese team. She joined the Los Angeles Sparks and played in the WNBA in 1997. Former coach Chuck Daly, who led Team USA to the gold medal at the 1992 Olympics, is also among the 12 members of the Hall of Fame class this year. The new inductees will be enshrined into the Hall of Fame together with the class of 2020, which was announced on Tuesday after being postponed for a year due to COVID-19.
He's old enough to drive and vote and shit, damn. Not quite old enough to buy cigarettes and liquor.
National brands, including Nike and Adidas, over their refusals to use Xinjiang cotton, citing forced labor allegations. We're at 46 minutes past the hour, and coming up in sports, China's first inductee into the FIBA Hall of Fame. Turning to sports now, here's Yang Guang.
Thank you, Shane. Women's basketball legend Chen Haishan became the first Chinese player to be inducted into the FIBA Hall of Fame as the World Basketball Governing Body announced the class of 2021 on Thursday. Standing over 2 meters tall, Chen claimed an Olympic silver medal in 1992 and was a World Championship runner-up in 1994 with the Chinese team. She joined Los Angeles Sparks and played in the WNBA in 1997. Former coach Chuck Daly, who led Team USA to the gold medal at the 1992 Olympics, is also among the 12 members of the Hall of Fame class this year. The new inductees will be enshrined into the Hall of Fame together with the class of 2020, which was announced on Tuesday after being postponed for a year due to COVID-19. Current Brooklyn Nets coach Steve Nash led the 12-member list. A digital ceremony will take place on June 18th.
Extra hours of data every month when you need it. It's enough to keep you on the road for that extra scenic route. On all voice and data plans, only with Fido. Visit a Fido store or fido.ca for details.
Hello, I'm Wolfgang Klein, Portfolio Manager with Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management and host of Hi-Fi Radio or Global News Radio 640 Toronto. I'm pleased to announce that our show has been moved forward to 7 p.m. Saturday nights. Please spend an hour with us and learn more about money. Managing money is simple, but it's not easy. A steady hand, foresight, experience, and a proven track record matters. Visit us at wolfgangklein.com. Any questions? Interested? Give me a call anytime. That's wolfgangklein.com.
Oh, I thought you were Kelvin.
But
Kelvin the money.
What do I say?
These are made up names. These are scam artists. They gotta be.
Did you like it?
Jill Taylor.
Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to just drive to the next window for your order because there are people waiting behind you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The next window. Yeah, right over there. Thank you.
Looking for tips on how to talk with your teens about cannabis? Visit drugfreekidscanada.org for more tools to help start the conversation. drugfreekidscanada.org.
How much trouble do I get in for letting that play? Can I do it once? Oh, but I don't check those very often.
We continue getting a reaction here tonight, and we're going to talk about hair and nails and business, and it's all rolled into one. We are joined by Francesca Ricchetti, who's founder and owner of Francesca Salon and Spa. Francesca, welcome.
Yeah, that's one coincidence.
Thank you for having me on again.
All right, Francesca, how do you feel? Were you prepared for what happened today?
Oh, of course.
Is that
Listen, you know what? They never give you 2 weeks notice before you open. So I don't know. You know what? This wasn't nice because you know what? Guess what? A lot of hairdressers out there had to put out a lot of money to restock, start booking clients, back and forth. I had people emailing, Francesca, why aren't you taking away lists? Why aren't you taking appointments? Because I knew this was a way of shutting us up. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? It's like they know. They put these protocols
You're from somewhere within 3 blocks of my grandmother's house.
These health ministers know. They made the protocols that spas and salons follow. They know we're safe. We're not a restaurant that you go and you allow 25% to go and have dinner and take off their masks and eat. They don't do that when they come into a salon. We have protocols. Everybody has to sign a waiver. We couldn't be safer than anybody else. And you know what? They've learned that through this lockdown.
Why do you think they're doing this?
To throw in an extra couple words. You're not supposed to.
What do you think is happening here? You said they knew it. You're thinking that maybe they even set it up here.
Well, you know what? Honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore because every day you wake up and there's another story.
If I said St. Clair College or Ossington, you'd
it's
know.
like, you know what, it's so frustrating. They've had our industry closed for so many months. Listen, you know what, I don't want to point fingers, but you know what, at this point, it's like, okay, we don't have enough vaccination. So whose fault is that? Canada the Great doesn't have enough vaccinations. Whose fault is that we're not allowed to open?
You know, how do you feel? You know, what's your situation here? How long can you hang on?
We don't possess that yet.
What's
going on inside?
You know, honestly, I don't know if they're all first-time viewers.
How many people at the party? 6 people? I got 12,000
this place for 28 years. I have 19 employees. That's 19 families. Okay, that's a big business to run. How can I manage 5 months closed down, no revenue? Come on. Listen, you don't have to be a university graduate to figure this out. There's got common sense, man. It's not happening. You know what? Invest your vaccinations in where we have problems. You guys know by now, this is the 3rd lockdown. You know where the problems are. Vaccinate those areas so we can clean this mess up and everybody gets back on their feet if we can. Because you know what? Honestly, like 5 months goes down as a business.
It's unbelievable. It's incredible. How can you survive it? Francesca, you know, we look around and we saw people preparing and are people just making decisions here? You know, people like yourself. Are you saying, okay?
When they announced it that they were going to open up 2 weeks from now, they never announced that kind of stuff, okay? But they did that to shut us up. And you know what? A lot of people, unfortunately, fell for that, and they spend so much money because you need products to start up again. You're closed for 4 months. You have to buy product. You have to rehire your staff. Like this. You know what? It's ridiculous. Honestly, what they're doing to our industry is ridiculous because you know what? Obviously, they know that we've been in the lockdown since November, and they know it's not us. They know it's not us. Why don't they let us open like everybody else and help with everybody's morale,
all the homeless people that look scruffy,
and you know, getting these people at
least be an exemption. If you're homeless, you should be allowed to get a haircut.
Come on, we're an essential. We help people feel good. That's
all the
what our
industry is all about. They're not allowed to go get a haircut.
Feel good. Be it a man, be it a woman, be it a child. Come on, man. Like, we are
Sergeant Preston standing next to you on the subway.
This is the 3rd lockdown. It's not us. We are essential. This is what this government hasn't figured out. In black and white, come on.
Yeah, let me ask you, Francesca, you know, you said, you know, that people shut up. What are you going to do? I mean, I wouldn't want to be a politician and you're nailing me to the wall, Francesca. What are you going to do?
Do we have a choice, honestly? Like, honestly, do we have a choice?
Did you live in the same building as me when I was really little or something?
You know what? It just kills me. 28 years I worked to the bone, you know, to make a business successful and to service people and to make people feel good. And, you know, and then with like a blink of an eye between this government, they've destroyed my business. 28 years.